Recording. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fundraising Talk. This is, I think, our 16th webinar. It's an initiative that Melanie Jackson and myself put together many months ago now, where we wanted to bring together the fundraising community and support each other and bring best practice from within our own community, as well as bringing guest speakers to share experiences and share knowledge. So thank you for joining Fundraising Talk. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are talking about donor prospecting and the challenges around that, in the sense of what are we doing wrong? What do we need to go back and revisit? What do we need to remind ourselves to do? And as Melanie and I always say, when we facilitate these sessions, we're not the experts. We have many years of experience between us, but we're not the experts. We are here to facilitate, share knowledge, bring together best practice, and create this tribe that we as a tribe can support each other. So yeah, welcome to Fundraising Talk, welcome to do donor prospecting, and we look forward to a very interactive, exciting next hour. For those of you that haven't been on the call before, just some house rules. Please make sure that you are muted and your camera is off. Please put questions in the chat box, and we will monitor those questions and we will do Q&A towards the end. This session is recorded, and we have a YouTube channel, which we'll share with you shortly, where most of the webinars have been put up there, and every week we will continue to add content. So you can not only look at this week's, but go back and look at previous stuff. There are very knowledgeable, wonderful resources, ladies and gentlemen. And the great thing with both what we've put together between Melanie and myself and our guest speakers, it's open source. So please use it as your personal training portal to keep on improving yourselves, share with your colleagues, and we really hope that the more and more people that use this, the better we can improve as a sector to support each other and do the best we can do during some very difficult times. So those of you that don't know us, this is us, what we call ourselves as the disruptors, in the sense that many and I believe that we've disrupted the fundraising sector because we've had to think differently, do things differently during COVID, and now the new normal. So my name is Kelvin Glenn. I'm the pretty one on the left. My co-host is Melanie Jackson, the pretty one on the right. We do have a WhatsApp group, and we've got about 115 people on that group where we share information and we talk about these seminars. So if you want to join us, if you're not on the WhatsApp group, please get hold of either Melanie or myself, and we will gladly add you to the WhatsApp group. As I said, we do have a YouTube channel. The link is down there. Otherwise, just search YouTube Kelvin Glenn Fundraising Talk, and all these presentations are on the YouTube channel for you to use. Melanie?
Yes, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for making the time. We know how busy everybody is, but of course, finding those elusive donors is always something that we want to hear more about. So I hope that we'll be able to help you today. Don't forget about the questions in the chat box. And if you have some nuggets of advice to share, please don't hesitate to do so. But I think let's get this party started and get on with things.
Great. So, first protocol, ladies and gentlemen, is that you have to make it easy for your donors to find you. It is pointless prospecting donors, and when they want to find more information or they want to know more about what you're doing and they can't find you. So it's very important that you take a critical and detailed look at your organization, and even ask a friend, a mate, a family member, a loved one, an enemy, to go and do some Googling and searching on your organization and get constructive feedback of where you can improve. So it's very important that you make sure that your donors can find you, that when you're spreading the word about your organization, it's easy for them and would-be supporters to find you, and they know how to support you and what you need support with. So first thing is your website. You need to have that donate page. Please make sure also that your website has got the HTTPS security, so that people know, the S stands for security, so people know that if they're donating online, that their information is secure. Please make sure that your look and feel on the page of your website matches your brand. We see this all too often. NGOs change brands or update brands or change colors of logos or whatever, and their website is not updated. Your website is your brand. It is the eyes to your organization. So it's very important that you make sure your website reflects your brand and your values, your look, your feel, everything else. Guide your donors. Make suggested gift amounts along with the impact labels. In other words, 50 Rand a month can help feed this child. 200 Rand can plant a tree. 200 Rand a month can sponsor the price of a kennel in an animal welfare shelter for a month. Give your donors those little boxes to work with. Don't presume that they know and understand your work and your organization. Make it easy for them. And then it's imperative that you try and hook that donor, that they give a recurring gift so that they sign up for that monthly debit or that monthly gift. So it's not just a once-off, because human beings, we will forget to go back next month and donate again or pledge again. So try and get them to do scheduled giving. A lot of the banks in South Africa are now doing scheduled giving where you can set it up that every month the debit order is managed by yourself, not by the beneficiary, or that they sign up for that debit order. And then newsletters, ladies and gentlemen. Your newsletter sign up is probably your lowest hanging fruit with hooking donors. Because if people want to know more about your organization and they sign up for that newsletter, you've got them on your database. And that's what we all want. We want to grow our databases. So please make sure that that newsletter sign up, the ask, and the appeal is in their faces on your websites. We've seen with a lot of organizations, the sign up for the newsletter or the newsletter sign up button is on the skin, is on every single page of the website, so that it's constantly asking people to sign up and be part of the newsletter. So make it easy for your donors to find you. If you don't make it easy, your donors are going to go somewhere else where it is easy to find a way of giving and supporting.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, Calvin, I think it's also important that your processes are easy.
Yeah.
That it's easy to sign up to a newsletter, that it's easy to make a donation. You're not clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking to find your page. That is just going to turn donors off. So don't forget about that. It's not just how beautiful it looks, it's how beautifully it works.
Absolutely.
So, data mining. I mean, this is an interesting concept because everything is about data these days. Everybody wants information, and information has a price tag. So how do we look for donors? The first place you look is who used to fund you. Why did they stop? Could you convince them to give again? Because the one thing that we all know, it's far easier to get somebody to give again than it is to get them to give for the first time. So have a look, who stopped? And sometimes it's as simple as nobody asked. Did you know that is the single most common answer given when people are asked why they don't give? It's because nobody asked them. So go back, have a look. Did you blot your copybook with them? Is it something you can fix? Is it something you can make amends on and repair the relationship? You don't want to lose a donor. This is not the time to be throwing donors away. So really have a look through your history, talk to people who've been in the organization for a long time, especially if you haven't been. Be amazed what gems are hidden in those conversations. And then what directories and sources do you use? I often get asked, should we subscribe to donor directories? And my answer always is, if you can afford it, yes, please do. But also know that the moment that you purchase a database, it is outdated. The moment you buy it. Because the very next day, somebody resigns, wins the lotto, does something exotic, and they are no longer the contact person in your database. So I always say, yes, make the investment if you can. Make sure that you use it if you invest in it. But it is your starting point. It's not your end point. It's just going to give you maybe an organization name, a foundation name, or a company name. It's not going to be something that for the next 6 years, you just press send on the email address that you see in front of you. You need to still do your research. And then you also need to keep a record. And again, I often get asked, should we have a fancy CRM? No. Excel works exceptionally well as a record keeping system, as does MS Access, unless you use a Mac like I do, in which case there is not an MS Access for Mac. But if you use PC, there is nothing wrong with MS Access, and there's nothing wrong with MS Excel. And don't forget as well that those products are available through TechSoup, so you may not even have to pay for them. So I would say don't rush into something exotic. Keep it simple. If you feel that and what a lovely problem to have, you're starting to get too many records to keep on a spreadsheet, then you start looking at a CRM system.
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Melanie. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of us that have been around the block and done this for far too long, we remember the old days of 17 or 20 LibreArch files in our office with piles and piles of paper. Those days have gone. And please, if any of you have still got piles and piles of paper, you need to migrate to a digital platform. And as Melanie said, we need to move to digital where you can mine databases, you can sort databases, you can segment your databases, you can make notes real time so that your colleagues can see what's going on. But like any digital, and like the old paper-based, unless it's updated, it is outdated. And it's going to actually be useless and not cost-effective for you. So it's mostly to reiterate that we live in a pre-digital and post-digital. We live in a post-digital era where everything is online. But like anything, what you put in is what you get out. You put in junk, you're going to get junk out. So it's very important also if you have colleagues that are supporting you in the admin process, or even volunteers that are doing admin for you in the database, that database is fresh, clean, crisp, and up to date. Because the last thing you want to do is write to Mary Lou when it's actually Pete Bombies, that is the CSR manager. So it's very important you make sure your data is up to date. And if you do have those old LibreArch files, put that data into the real-time database, because as Melanie says, you never know what gems are sitting there. Okay. Melanie, this one's yours.
It is. Where do we find these donors? And yes, we've talked about databases. They're very helpful. But there are other ways that we can very successfully hunt down donors. And what we've done here is we've kind of looked at it from an in and out kind of perspective in terms of what comes from the outside world and what do we look for. Web and signups to newsletters, as we've said, lovely source of individual givers. Our own networks, the networks of our colleagues. As you know, some of my time and Kelvin's is spent doing strategic planning for nonprofits, particularly around fundraising. And one of the things I always say is that everyone is a fundraiser. We all have networks. We all have family and friends who work for different organizations. And I do believe that nonprofits don't take advantage of sometimes very low-hanging fruit. Maybe it's because they're a little bit embarrassed to make the ask, and then perhaps the ask can come from someone else. But it really is important to really use and utilize those networks that we have within our organizations. Your board members are part of your network and are often quite influential people. We've had some scenarios where board members have been very happy to share names, but they don't want to talk to the person. And that's fine. I will happily go and talk to the person. Just supply the introduction for me. Your current donors may be able to introduce you to other donors. Media, blogs and opinion pieces, social media. I amuse the heck out of my clients. If I go to Joburg with them, I have my phone out all the time. I take photographs of logos on the side of trucks. I take photographs of warehouses on the freeway as we're whizzing past, because all of those have company names on them that I have never encountered before. And when I get back into my office, I go and research and see if any of them would be a good prospect for one of my clients. So it's really important to be observant, to keep looking. Donors are everywhere. You know, somebody said to me, I have to have a database. I can't work without one. And I said to them, but your best database is Google. You can Google CSI, disability, CSI, preschool education, or ECD, you would be amazed at what comes up. So don't discount that. On the other side of things, that research, the data mining, introductions, responding to calls for proposals. It's really important that we keep an eye on those websites and alerts that we can set up to be able to know when a call for proposals comes out. Set up a Google alert with calls for proposals as your key. And then, of course, as I've said, you've got those databases that make a great starting point.
Thanks, Mel. And another one which we didn't put in, which it's just dawned on me now because my phone's ringing, is your own social platforms. And a great one is LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn, you can really, it's like a Google, and depending on the person's profile, you can really stalk some interesting people on LinkedIn and make some great connections. So you need to be making sure that your personal LinkedIn profile is up to date, and that you can also use that as a search tool for the outgoing as far as connecting with people and doing research on individuals.
And Merle's actually given us a good prompt in the comments. Look at organizations doing similar work to you.
Absolutely.
Have a read through their annual reports. Who's funding them? You know,
absolutely.
We fall into this trap that we're stealing donors. Of course we're not stealing donors. Donors have brains of their own. If they want to fund you, they will fund you. If they don't, they'll carry on funding or find something else that they want to fund. Our job is to find as many opportunities as we can. And the digital age has opened that up to us in a way that when Kelvin and I were green little fundraisers many years ago, we could never have even imagined. So it's really important to take advantage of that.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're not looking at your competitors' annual reports on their website, you're doing yourself a disjustice, because you can see what programs they're doing, who their partners are, where they're working, because all of us use that as a brag tool. Look how great we are. Look at the great success we've had. And believe you me, the other fundraiser next door, down the road, up the road, in another province is looking at your information. So you need to be stalking other organizations and learning from them, learning what they do right, learning what they do wrong.
We mean stalking in the nicest possible way.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you're aware that you can make yourself anonymous on LinkedIn. The downside is that you can't see who stalks you, but there are ways to make yourself anonymous and pop onto people's profiles and just get a sense of who they are and what they do and how they might be able to help you.
Yeah, so lots of information, and again, very simple in and out. Put this in your notebook somewhere and just use these tools. Right, so what we call the sales process, because at the end of the day as fundraisers, what we actually are salespeople. But instead of selling you a motor vehicle or a cup of coffee, we are selling you a dream and an investment in the future of the cause that you're supporting. So research prospects on the website can get you, what do they do? What does the donor do? What is their line of business? Who are they associated with? Because believe you me, the donors will also be bragging about the other charities they're supporting. And why do they support that cause? And do they support a cause like yours? So in other words, if an organization is really focusing on the environment and you're in animal welfare or disability, you've got to weigh it up and say, well, is this worth chasing? And if they do support the environment and you're an environmental organization, try and understand why they support the environment. Is it peer pressure? Is it public pressure? Is it stakeholder pressure? Is it aligned to their business, etc., etc. The who. You need to find out who is the person, what is their title, their contact details. We're putting a postal address because this is the, in the real world, in the first world, post is still there. South Africa, sorry for you, it's not that active. But sometimes it is important to just have it on the database if you can, but the least you need is an email address, a phone number, and the person's contact details. Most companies, you can at least get their physical address as well. And then the really important thing is the how. A lot of fundraisers criticize corporates because, oh, there's all these forms you've got to fill in, or you've got to go through this gatekeeper, or you can only apply between the 10th and the 12th of the month, or whatever. You need to respect that from the donor. If the donor has put in that it is an application process, or it's a letter of inquiry, or it's a generic proposal, you need to respect that, because if you don't follow their protocols and respect their boundaries, you're already starting on the wrong foot. But most donors will share this information because that's what they want. They want you to apply in a certain format. And it is painful, but you need to respect that. And then the when. When is the deadline? That is most important. Sorry, I've got dogs playing outside and barking. Apologies. The when. The when is the important. So if they have a deadline, please, 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 fundraising 101, do not miss the deadline and be arrogant enough and ask for an extension. That's just not on. So it's very important to know when is their deadline and when is their decision going to be made and by whom. Because often we are misled that if the deadline is January, we think we're going to get an answer on the 1st of February. Their CSI committee may only sit in March or April, but they need it by January to consolidate, sift, put processes in place. And if you know that their decision is going to be March or April, you contact them in March or April. You don't contact them in February and say, I sent you a proposal last week. Can I have an answer, please? Because all you're going to do is upset your donor and make an enemy before you make a friend.
Sure.
Right, moving on.
So if you can, and I know that right now it is a little more challenging to get in touch with anybody in business, but do your best, try to follow this because it really does help. So in a real normal world where COVID is a distant memory, wouldn't that be nice? Make that initial phone call to confirm that you do have the right person, that the company's focus area hasn't suddenly changed. Because what you've also got to remember is between the time when you go, oh, this looks like a great prospect, and when you get to making the call, they may have had a strategic planning session the day before, and they suddenly are now funding giraffes, and you do not have a giraffe project. So keep that in mind. Make sure that the contact information is correct. Make sure that the format of the ask is correct. And then that all-important deadline or decision-making meeting date. You really want to try and get that information if you can. And then you ask whether a proposal may be sent. You ask for permission. May I send you a proposal? I think our work fits very nicely with what you're trying to achieve. Confirm that you will call to confirm receipt. I think it's one thing to unsolicited annoy a donor and say, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? But if you say, may I call you in 48 hours to just confirm that you've received the document? I don't think anybody can take offense to it. And the worst thing they can do is say no, which is not too painful. And if you're feeling frisky and you feel that you've got a good rapport going with the person that you're talking to, it's always good to know what their average grant size is, because it helps you to make an ask that doesn't do you a disservice, but also doesn't make them feel as though you're being grabby. So it's really, really helpful information. But you'll notice that the way that we've formatted this is specifically so that you can do as much research on the web as you can before you make that phone call. There's nothing worse for a poor, harried, harassed CSI person to have to answer questions that are clearly stated on the website. Please do your research first. If you take nothing away from this other than that, I will be a happy bunny. Do your research.
Absolutely, Mel. And just to share in that, having sat in that Happy Harry website, CSI position before, there is nothing more frustrating than when somebody gets your cell number and then phones you and says, do you fund this? When it's very clear on your website. Because what it tells the donor is that this is a very disorganized fundraiser, a very lazy fundraiser, and a very unprofessional fundraiser. Remember that you are representing a brand and you're representing our sector. So please, we plead with you, It is hard. It is a lot of work, but follow the processes and respect your donor. The best happy CSR manager is one that is respected, and also don't shoot the messenger. So if they don't fund giraffes, don't scream and jump up and down and try and convince them that giraffes need to be funded, because it might not have even been their decision, because generally that's a board decision at strategy level. So please respect the gatekeeper that they are, and make friends, don't make enemies of your CSR managers. And any trust foundation, donor, whoever it is. All right, make that follow-up call. If you can, if you can't, it's a very nicely worded email. Within the time frame you stipulated that you agreed, if we put in the last slide with the donor, give them that courtesy call. Please, 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 I know we all have become conditioned with WhatsApp, but I've had the experience where people that are not on my WhatsApp or in my contacts suddenly WhatsApp me and go, but we sent you the proposal last week, and when can we expect the check? No, that's not the way it's done. If you agree that you're going to make a follow-up call, make that follow-up call. Or if it was going to be an email, make an email. We've all got diaries, diarize it. Thank them for accepting the proposal, or offer to resend, because most likely they will say, I haven't seen it yet, or yeah, it's in my 140 emails I've still got to look at. So if it's convenient, I'm happy to resend it for you so that it's at the top of your emails. Please ensure that you have all the supporting information. Again, when I've been the Happy Harry CSR manager, I have been ruthless. If a copy of the MPO certificate or the MPO number is not there, I don't care how fantastic your project is. If you haven't got the courtesy to put that into the pack, you're out. I'm not going to phone you and say, sorry, can I have your MPO number? Can I have your bank account number so we can actually put the money in the bank? Make sure that if they ask for like letters confirming your bank account, copies of IDs of board members, MPO certificates, and your financial statements, make sure it's sent. And if you don't have the complete pack, get permission to send an incomplete pack. Don't just submit an incomplete pack hoping that it'll get through, because that is disrespectful. And they're doing it for their own governance and regulation. The globe is ripe with issues and fraud around donations, so they have their own rules and regulations for a reason. And if you can't respect that, how can they trust you with their funding? So it's very important you make sure you have all that. And we were saying this at a meeting the other day. Have all that in the bank. Have it already all in a folder on your desktop, on your computer. Mm-hmm. When you're doing your application, you should not be running around trying to find the annual financial statements, a copy of the PBO certificate, the bank letter, all that gumph. You know you need it. Have it in a folder. And things like bank letters, please remember they have a 90-day expiry date. So every 3 months, you need to make sure that your organization gets a fresh letter. Most of the banks, you can download yourself from the internet if you've got access to the company's banking, but make sure that banking letter is fresh. Annual financial statements, do not send signed annual financial statements from 2017 and say, that's our latest, because if your latest signed annual financial statements is only 2017 and you're in 2020, we've already got a problem. So please make sure you've got all that stuff done.
In fact, sorry, Calvin, just to add to what you've said there, what I've developed over the years is a template, and I drop in all of the important information: telephone numbers, addresses, who are the auditors, when is the financial year end, what is the PBO number, who the board members are, what they do, how long they've been on the board. All of that should be in a little template pack that you keep, and it just makes life so much easier.
Also, heads up, a lot of the donors are now starting to ask for information for the management team. Who is on your management team? What is the NQF level? What is the demographic? What is the sex? Do you have any people with disabilities that you employ? They're going to start asking these questions. So as Melanie said, have it in a lovely template. That should already be the start of your document so that it's done. Because it's no use you've written this lovely proposal and then it sits on your computer for 3 weeks while you're trying to find an NPO certificate. Lastly, confirm when you are able to follow up again. So if you've now submitted, they've been graceful to have a conversation with you and they say, listen, we've got the proposal, it all looks great, it's going forward to the committee for discussion, or it's going forward to the secretariat or the decision makers, just ask and say, would you mind me asking when that decision will be made? And if it's the end of April, don't phone them at 5 o'clock on the last day of April, give them time to breathe. but follow up a couple of days later, or ask when it would be convenient to follow up. And diarize this. You've all got diaries, use it. And then as you put in, rinse and repeat until you get success. So like sales, like any salesperson will tell you, you've got to constantly have that pipeline of clients. You've got to constantly have that pipeline of donors. You've got to constantly be selling to be able to close deals. So this is the framework. This is the checklist. This is the basics. Put all this in place, and it just makes life a little bit easier for you and for your team. And hopefully it then makes fundraising a little bit more exciting because you're not doing all that laborious, painful stuff.
So this is something that I encourage everyone to do. It's actually something that I do. If I know I'm going to be doing a research exercise for a client, I sit down and I script. And it's something that we've stolen from the sales process. If you look at corporate sales, this is what people do. And sometimes you can hear, have you ever phoned a call center or had a call center phone you and they go, "Hello, Mrs. Jackson. Thank you for taking my call." Now, we don't want to sound like that, but what you can do is you can start to think about, what are the objections going to be? What are the things that people are going to say? And make sure that you have an answer. You can overcome the objection. So I literally, particularly if I'm working with someone where I'm mentoring them or I'm helping them to get started, we keep it really simple. We start off with an exercise that says, how many ways can you say CSI? Because 9 times out of 10, you'll pick up the phone and say, "Please may I go through to your CSI department?" And the receptionist will go, "Huh?" And then you have to think, okay, what else can I call it so this person will understand where I'm trying to go? Who's the person who deals with your charitable giving as an organization? Ah, no, that's Mrs. Brown. Right, please may I speak to Mrs. Brown? And what you must also make sure that you try to do, if you don't have a name, get the name beforehand. Because what will often happen is the receptionist will go, "Yes, I'll put you through." And that's the end. And the next thing you're listening to music. And next time you don't know who to ask for, particularly if you don't get through. So now you go through the whole rigmarole again of how many ways can you say CSI to try and get the person's name or get put through to the right extension again. So write a script, practice it, talk amongst yourselves, get, while we're working from home, get your 3-year-old to role play with you, do what needs to be done so that you're as prepared as you can be. Print out a copy of your funding proposal. Have that with you, because if you find someone who's engaged and who's interested, you must be able to answer their questions to the best of your ability. So, if they say to you, "So how long has your organization been in existence for?" Look at your template. "Oh, we were established in 1996, and over the years, our programs have changed." I mean, it's quite interesting. My first fundraising job was in a mission hospital almost 20 years ago. I can still tell you how many beds were in the hospital, when it was established, who established it. That information is really important. Until it is cemented in your head, don't be afraid to write a script.
Absolutely. And update your script, ladies and gentlemen, because as you finish that call with this prospective donor, if the donor asks you a question that you couldn't answer or that you thought was quite relevant, jot it down, so that I guarantee you the next person will ask a similar question. So as you become better at this, that script becomes second nature and it's in your head. But every time you speak to a donor, you will learn something, or a prospective donor. So as you have those tidbits, don't get off the phone and think, "Oh, that was a terrible call." Reflect and say, "Okay, why couldn't I answer that question?" The other thing is be prepared. We were working with an organization, and this organization had a global scandal outbreak. Now, for the next 6 months, every time you speak to a donor, the donor's going to go, "Nah, how did you respond to that?" or "What was the story?" I had a similar situation when I was with Tiger Brands, when they were caught by the Competition Commission for bread price fixing, and that was now 15 years ago. To this day, they still get challenged on that item about the bread price fixing. You need to have the official statement available so that you can answer the question of how it was resolved, how it was dealt with, and how it will not happen again, especially if you've had fraud, you've had allegations of sexual assault, you've had chairmen of boards that have been fired, money's gone missing, beneficiaries die on your watch, whatever the case may be. Make sure that anything that can hinder your ability to raise money, you've got an answer for. If you do not have an answer, you go to your senior leadership or you go to your board, and you need to have an official standpoint from the organization. So it's very important that it's no use getting time with someone and then you go, and you just got a mouthful of teeth and you can't answer the questions, because their time is precious. So what happens when you get the money? And this is something I'm going to harp on because this is a hobby horse of mine. As fundraisers, like salespeople, we are constantly chasing the money. We are constantly chasing the next deal. But the big mistake a lot of fundraisers make is they forget to put as much effort into their new and current donors as prospective donors. So if you can, first thing you do is get on the call and thank the donor telephonically, if you've got their contact details. If you don't, it's an email. If the money lands in the organization's bank and you have not sent a thank you call or a thank you email within 48 hours, you have drastically failed. And I know some of you will say, but we didn't know the money was in the bank. That's your internal issues, fix it. But it is imperative, and there's nothing more rewarding for a donor when they know that you've been paid and you send them a phone call or a voice note or an email to say, you've made our day, thank you so much, we really appreciate it, we're acknowledging the money, and we look forward to working with you. Very sweet and simple and short, but it just builds that relationship. Then you write your official thank you letter and know upfront if they're going to want their Section 18A certificates, and have that done.
And also make sure, the gift qualifies for Section 18A.
Absolutely. And I think, Melanie, that's another whole webinar which we need to do, because there's a big grey area around Section 18As and sponsorship versus donations. So I'll make you that commitment. We will get an expert in and we will have a webinar on Section 18As and what qualifies. Adhere to the terms of the funding agreement. Please, please, please adhere to the terms of the funding agreement. So we've done this before in one of the webinars. The minute that donor has agreed to that funding, and before the money gets spent out of the bank, sit with finance and make sure it's allocated correctly. So if they gave you 1,000 Rand a month for petrol, you may not spend 1,001 Rand. And you may not buy chocolates with the petrol money. So please make sure that the funding agreement is adhered to, and that you've got something on your computer that says, here's the budget, so that when you do your report, you cross-check and make sure that the money's been spent as per the agreement. Also be very, very careful on timeframes. Some donors are very specific. In this quarter, you've got to spend 25% of the total grant. And 25% of the petrol money needs to be spent in this quarter, unless it's been adhered to in a different format. Report back. Make sure you have got no excuse. Make sure that you know when reports are due, and I've beaten on this before, get your reports in 24 hours before deadline. That must be your absolute last resort, if not before then. Don't get the reports in the minute at lastminute.com. It's a very bad reflection. And for goodness sake, do not ask for an extension or get them in late. And then lastly, communicate. When the money comes in, I have seen this, and I will put up my hand, and I've made the same mistake being a CEO, where the money comes in and you're so busy dealing with 40 other things, you go, okay, great. You thank the donor, and then you forget to tell your team. I've had to ask for forgiveness when our teams come to me and said, I believe we got the funding 3 months ago. What happened? Please make sure that you communicate internally, that the minute the funding agreement is signed, you communicate with the team. The minute the money hits the bank, you communicate with the team. Internally, so that they know, so that the programs team know they've got budget. The finance team know they need to manage that money. The M&E team knows what they need to do, and the fundraising team knows what they need to do. And then comms as well. And we put here externally. If, and this is a massive if, and make sure that if you get permission, it's in writing. If your donor agrees to you communicating externally that they are supporting your organization, please take full advantage of that, because there is nothing more powerful in fundraising if you can say, Company A has just given us R1 million to help 55 giraffes. Because company B, which is a competitor to company A, who also funds giraffes, will be watching what company A is doing. So it's a great, great fundraising tool. However, please get permission. I have seen and been in the position where, again, made mistakes, put donors' logos on websites without permission and got my head chopped off. Make sure that you have written permission that you may publish the logo, the donor, and if they are happy that you announce exactly what that funding is going to be used for. You don't just presume that you can put that on your social media and your website. You need permission, especially now at the Poppy Act. So please make sure, and if you've got that permission, milk it, take full advantage, because it shows other donors that you've got confidence, you've got relationships, and that other people are investing in your programs.
And more than that, Calvin, it's a fundraising tool. If you've got an organization or a company who wants to link to another company who happens to be a donor of yours, well, isn't that a wonderful way to show how well they could work together? So it's an immensely powerful fundraising tool.
Yeah. So that's when you get the money. Make sure that you put these processes in place, because this is all part of your donor prospecting. Because if you mess this up, the next time you get money from that donor, it's going to be that much more difficult. Okay.
So what happens if you don't get the money? And I hate to tell you guys, this unfortunately is what happens more often than not. If you don't, try to get some information, some learning out of the process. Respond to the decline in writing and ask, could you share why we weren't successful? Because we'd like to learn from the exercise and improve our application. And you know, what's interesting, we forget that particularly CSI people are people. People like to be asked for their advice. And if you can catch the person on the right day and you gauge their mood, they will be very forthcoming. We were very afraid to make that connection. You know, we don't want to offend, we don't want to, but I think that's wrong. I think that as much as we as fundraisers sometimes feel like it's a lonely path, I think CSI people do too. And I think we maybe need to take a little more compassionate approach sometimes. I know it's frustrating when they don't see how amazing our programs are, but understand that we're one of maybe 400 people that they've had to say no to this week. And that's also not very nice. So keep that in mind and try to engage with your donors if you can. There are some guys who are brilliant. Louise at Old Mutual, as long as you don't phone her, she's a happy girl. She's very responsive on email, and she's more than happy to help, because at heart, she wants the sector to thrive. That's why she does what she does. So take advantage of the people like that who can help you learn.
And it's building relationship, ladies and gentlemen, because as I said, it goes to a CSI committee, it goes to a board. And again, I've had to be the happy Harry where you put through 10 proposals and only 3 are funded, and you have the horrible task of saying to the other 7, sorry guys. And believe me, I was a coward. I didn't want to phone you and say, hey Mel, thank you so much for all the work you put into that, but sorry you're not getting the funding. It's much easier to send the standard email or standard letter. Remember also, they've got their own issues from a compliance and a risk perspective. So sometimes those standard letters are all they're allowed to send you. Don't take it negatively. And also, don't pick up the phone and rant and rave and go, well, now 300 children are going to die and 40 giraffes are going to die because you didn't give us money. As Melanie says, it's not necessarily the CSR manager's fault. And also, they've only got so much money. But if you do this correctly and build the rapport, the next time, which may be in a year or 2 years' time, when you submit the proposal for future funding, they will remember you because you've been professional, you've been eloquent, you've respected them, and thank them again, even though they haven't given you money and they've now told you why not. Still, thank them. Thank you so much for looking at our proposal and considering it. Thank you so much for sharing this information. We really appreciate it. You've empowered us to improve and do better. And we look forward to be able to submit a proposal in the future with you. Boom. Or if their focus is giraffes and you're doing, coffee beans, don't try and change their focus. Respect that, because these CSR managers are also human. and they will talk as well. So if you upset them, they're going to badmouth you and they're going to tell people how rude you are. But build them as friends. And it's the thing we talk about in fundraising. Fundraising is friend raising. You may even get them as a personal giver in their personal capacity if they believe in what you're doing. So as hard as it is, because all you want to do is grump around like a grumpy old person and stomp your feet and go, it's not fair because you're putting so much work into this proposal, learn from it. If you can learn from it, be the bigger person, and also give that feedback to your team. If the budget was a mess, if the programs are not reflective of good M&E, if the geographical area isn't right, if you're not inclusive in your programs, if your expenses are too high, if that's the feedback you got, give your team that feedback, because that'll help your organization grow so that the next proposal is more slick and better. And okay, then spread the word. As I said, if you get the permission from your donor, and even if you don't, I've had donors that have been very explicit with clients that have said, listen, we're giving the funding, but please don't blame about it because we don't want 700 charities banging on our door. You could still talk about our programs are now going to be expanded by 400 beneficiaries because of the generosity of a donor. If they don't want their logo and their name published, you can still tell that good news and put that on all your media platforms, including WhatsApp as far as internal and WhatsApp groups and WhatsApp for business, all the rest of it. So put it on all your social media. If they allow you to promote their brand and talk about the donation, go mad. And if you can, try and get them to put it on their social media to talk about the good that they're doing. And then also put it on your website, put it in your newsletter, and do a blog about it. There is nothing more rewarding if you can get a piece from a donor, especially if it's an existing donor or a recurring donor, where they write an article for you that you can publish in your newsletter about why they're partnering with you. Do a blog or an opinion piece, put it on your website, because that helps you with your fundraising when you're prospecting other donors. It's all part of donor prospecting. So make sure that you communicate really, really strong and hard the minute you sign up a donor, or even when you're giving donor feedback reports. I've seen some lovely pieces and been part of some teams that have created some really amazing stuff when we have done phenomenal donor reports and sat back and gone, yo, we really did well on this project. That's great, feedback to the donor, but take that data and use it in your social media, in your website, your newsletters, and your blogs. I've seen some great stuff in newsletters where people talk about, for the past year, donor A has been funding us, and because of their support, we've managed to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I. Because that is good communications. And that also shows your donor that it's not just about a one-way communication of reporting back to them because you have to, but you're also sharing the impact of their donation with the public and with other donors. So spread the word as far and wide as you can. Mel, I think this one's yours.
This one mine, yes. So just before we go, this is something that I'm very passionate about. In fact, I did my first Zoom strategic planning meeting yesterday, and this featured quite heavily in the process. When we talk about our fundraising mix, it's where are the sources of funding? So what you want to be looking at is a really balanced pie. If you look at this one, and this is something that I use in my training, it comes from a real, actual nonprofit. It's quite a small nonprofit that's based here in Cape Town, right in the City Bowl, working with the homeless. If you have a look at their fundraising mix, it's a really nice balanced basket. And what that does, it mitigates the risk. The only recommendation I had for them was to increase the size of their individual giving, which is the dark blue on the right, 7%. I would like to see that being a little bit higher. The other 7% is their government funding, and I'm very comfortable that that stays there. I do believe that government has certain responsibilities to certain nonprofits, but the more funding they give, the more dependency they could create. So I was very comfortable with the 7%. I think that's great. And if you have a look, the second, well, on the left, the 15%, that's income generation. That's income that they've generated on their own. And that really I thought was quite excellent. It could still be higher. I'd love to see it go higher, but I was very impressed with it. And I've used this several times as an example, because from a risk perspective in terms of income, this is very good. And when you are looking at your fundraising and you're looking at which sources to focus your attention on, take the time to look at your history. Go back a couple of years and see what your pie chart looks like.
Yeah, Mel, and ladies and gentlemen, please just also be strategic. Do this exercise. It's a good internal exercise to do. But also, once you've done it, don't be afraid to share it in your proposals with your donors. Because what it does is it tells the donor you're not just reliant on individuals, or you're not just reliant on corporates. Because if they read your financials, they can work this out. It's not rocket science. But it's a nice tool to do because it shows your donor that you are diversifying your income. Because if all your income's coming from one income stream and that income stream goes south, you're at big risk. If you're working with a project that 80% of the income comes from government subsidies from DSD, and DSD changes strategy and cuts your subsidy, well, you're never going to make that 80% up in 6 months or a year. So do this exercise and map it. And then out of this, you can do your strategy of, okay, out of all these areas, how do we have targeted focuses on trusts and foundations, individuals, service, so that you're not just focusing on one source of income. But it's a lovely tool to use, and thank you for sharing, Mel. Right, the donor pyramid. Fundraising 101, we've all seen it in all the training manuals, but we're putting it in just to remind ourselves. Bottom of the pyramid is your supporters, your volunteers, and your prospects. And if we're talking about donor prospecting, I think it's important because until they start giving money, they're at the bottom of the pyramid. But you need to have that wide base. So as we've said, have as many possible prospects as possible. And even if they don't give you money, if you've engaged with them, you've at least educated them on your work and your cause. Then higher up the pyramid, you go to slower or low frequency donors, smaller low frequency donors. So a donor that gives you 100 Rand or 100 pounds. And I've shared the story before, but I'll share it again. When I was with the Red Cross and we were responding to the Haiti disaster, we had a gentleman who phoned into the call center and said, I want to give X amount of money. And to this day, I thank God that the director of fundraising picked up the call and picked up the query because he put in huge effort into that relationship. To this day, that individual is the biggest donor to the British Red Cross globally. But he started with a simple 100-pound donation to see how the organization did. And because he'd never been asked by the Red Cross before, he'd never given to them. But in response to the Haiti appeal, he thought, let me do something. And he can afford to give a lot more. And to this day, he's the biggest individual giver and has been given for more than 10 years now. So the small, low-frequency donors, don't underestimate them, ladies and gentlemen, because you never know who they are and how much more they can give. And the idea is you want to build your donors up. You then have your mid-level or consistent donors. These are people that are giving frequently, giving it a little bit more. They're more engaged. They're more involved in your organization. They can become ambassadors and help. And then lastly, you have your major and high-value donors. We all want the major high-value million Rand checks, but reality is it's not going to happen. And that also has at risk. You can't have 3 1 million Rand checks so you and hope that you're going to survive. Because if one of those pull, you've got a problem. But you need to make sure that you're working your donor pyramid in your prospecting as well. Because the mistake we make with prospecting is we see prospecting as bringing on new donors on board. I see prospecting as educating, bringing on new donors, and then prospecting your donors to continue to give on the donor journey right until even beyond their life where they're given a legacy. Then you've been successful in fundraising. So don't negate or neglect your current or old donors because if they've given to you once, they're more than likely to give it to you again unless you've really messed up. So make sure you're working your donor pyramid and you're prospecting as well.
Definitely, Kelvin. And I think also just to add on that, what you were talking about, your lovely donor to the British Red Cross. Donors test you. Make no mistake. And I found myself doing it as well. I'll give a smallish gift just to see how I'm treated. And I have to tell you that I have yet to make a gift and be wowed. And I think that's quite a sad reflection on on the organizations in Cape Town. And they were organizations, all of them are organizations doing good work. I admire the work that they're doing, but I was not wowed by the way that they treated me as a donor. So that might be something to keep in mind.
Yeah. All right, Mel, before we talk about the upcoming events, which I'll leave on screen so that you can diarize, let's talk about some questions.
Yes, I have a question in the chat from Alana. How do you show off your donors while protecting you from your competitors snooping your funders?
Oh, Alana, good question, but we all do it because you snoop your competitors, I'm sure. I don't have an answer for that. I think that you've got to do the flip side. I think that the more you can wow and promote the partnership with your donors, the better it is for your fundraising. Yes, you're at risk that your competitors will see that, but believe you me, they will find a way of finding out anyway, whether it's through you or your donor or somebody else. So I would turn it on its head and say, what are the advantages? The disadvantages, your competitors will snoop, but the advantages, much greater. So yeah, it's a great question, but a very difficult one that I don't think we have the answer for.
It's a loaded question, and I personally do have an answer for it. I don't believe there's any such thing as snooping in this instance. I just feel that the information comes out one way or another. It's not stealing, it's not snooping, it's sharing. And I think we've got to get away from that silo territorial kind of mindset and into a mindset that is, if your projects have amazing impact, you will be funded. That's the bottom line. So I think we need to move away from territoriality and to look and focus more on being the best that we can be and showing that we are the people you want to fund because we're being the best we can be. And Alana has her hand up, so I'm going to ask her to come off mute.
Thank you very much. Thanks for answering that question.
Alana, can you just tell us who you are, please?
Oh, yes. Certainly.
We know you, but the rest of the people don't.
Thanks, Calvin. Hi, I'm Alana James. I'm the CEO of the Sunflower Fund. Thanks for having my question. And I think one of the things when I just logged on, and apologies, I was about 4 minutes late, but you spoke about everyone in the organization being a funder. And obviously, I absolutely support that. And I can see that in the chats, people were asking for a whole lot of different things. And I would really love to ask for you guys to consider in one of your next sessions to really focus on those different groups. How do we as leaders in the organization and our fundraising leaders, so my head of fundraising, how do we get the best out of our board, out of our other staff members who fear the word fundraising? I mean, our own internal staff, because we understand how much sales is involved in fundraising, and we just have that fear factor around it. So, you know, a session for those staff members to really get them as excited about fundraising as the rest of us are, that would be absolutely amazing if you would consider that. And then just to add, Mel, something that I can see in the questions and that you've taught my team in fundraising is that partnerships are some of the best fundraising tactics. And that's where we've been really successful, is in building partnerships to support our fundraising activities. And thanks for a really great session. Thanks.
Thank you, Alana. And we are running out of time. Is there one more question that somebody
I would like to just comment on something that Mel put in to say, be cautious of listing all the donors who have supported you in your communications or newsletters, as you will alienate those who have not been thanked, including the grannies who knitted jerseys and beanies for the children you care for. Mel, you'll learn to get to know me. I'll challenge and push back, and I'll push back to you and say, well, if that's your comment, then you have failed. Because if a granny has taken the effort to knit jerseys and beanies for the children, you don't necessarily have to thank her in the newsletter, but if you haven't thanked her in a letter or a phone call or a photograph or something, then you're acknowledging that you are not valuing her donation. So I'm not saying because somebody gives you R1 million and a grant, that's 20 beanies and one is more important than the other. I would say you need to be profiling all your donors. So talking about the granny that's knitting the beanies and the R1 million donation. But if you're forgetting to thank donors, then it goes back to organizational structure and processes. And so it's very important to make sure that you are making sure that when Granny does knit those beanies, she is felt like she is valued and appreciated. And she is valued and appreciated because those beanies are valuable to your work. So nice comment, but I'm not going to let you get off the hook. You need to take that as an opportunity and turn it around so that it's positive.
Can I add that basically, okay, you know that I work as a fundraising consultant. So I assist my clients with doing newsletters, and I caution about mentioning specific donors in our biannual newsletters. But that particular client wanted everybody listed categorically in month and detail. And I cautioned against doing that because I said, if you forget someone, and that is exactly what happened. There were a group of grannies that send stuff from the UK that send Fair Isle jerseys, and they actually felt very offended that everybody was listed except them.
Except them.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a valid point, and it depends on the organization. And I agree that you can't list every single donation. So thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be strict with time in respect of everybody. Our upcoming events next week, we've got the Resource Alliance who are going to be online. I really encourage you to come onto the session because they've had to reinvent themselves and they're going into a whole new online platform where they want to create a global community of best practice and a community of practice for fundraisers. So much of what we're trying to do in South Africa, they are looking at from a global perspective. And as South African fundraisers, we can learn from what's happening all over the world. So it's going to be a very informative, very interesting session with a lot of wealth of information and access to amazing data. So I'd encourage you to come onto that. And then the 20th of August, Melanie and I are going to be discussing the things you need to grow individual giving. So although Lana's jumped off the call, we are starting to answer those questions where we're going to start doing webinars to specific donor groups. We are possibly also be having one or two guests on that call, but on the 20th of August, we're specifically looking at what do you need to do to grow individual giving for your organization. With that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of our tribe. If you're not part of the WhatsApp group, please get hold of us. Millie and I will gladly add you. If you need help, we're here to help you. Melanie, over to you for final closure.
Yes, thank you all so much for taking the time today. Please join us next week. The Resource Alliance offers amazing resources to fundraisers. And yep, don't forget, the tribe is here for you. Please join the WhatsApp group, become a member of the tribe, ask the questions that you have. We love having everybody on the team. So stay warm, stay well. See you next week.
Bye. See you next week, everyone. Oh, please just a final reminder, this will be recorded and will be on the YouTube channel by this afternoon. And I'll put that on the WhatsApp group as well. Take care, everyone. Cheers. Bye.